society we live in today don't even acknowledge the knife was even there. Don't even acknowledge the wound. So we can't look for the healing to come from, the place that the attack came from. And that's where that defensiveness comes, that hesitation, like, I don't want to be poked again. I don't want to be stabbed. So yeah, taking the war out of our words is very, very critical right now. And that's a great segue to jump into part 2. Where we're going to get into the deliberate cooperative economic development. Like we just said earlier, we just left Independence Day. That's celebrated by this country. What does independence look like for us? And I think that a lot of us, I know myself included, I thought that independence, INDEPENDENT, do you know what that mean, man? Webby had me twisted. I was thinking that I just needed to get right. A lot of us, I thought that if I get right, the problems for my people will be fixed. That's wrong. That's not independently moving, African minded. That's not by looking to each other saying, we're going to study that. We're going to see today what that looks like. I really do. And the power that we form when we move independently. It's not defensively. We're not waiting. We're not just responding to what happens to the things that's already been set into play. No, we're building our own. We're healing by looking to each other saying, I love you. I really do love you. Now let's work. We're going to start with this great quote. Man, this is deep. So it says here, Rosenberg, 1940. He says, when the invincible force of cooperation meets the immovable mountain of prejudice, fear, ignorance, and lack of self-confidence, the mountain melted into thin air. When the invincible force of cooperation meets the immovable mountain of prejudice, fear, ignorance, and lack of self-confidence, the mountain melted into thin air. The invincible force, cooperation, forged ahead and is growing by leaps and bounds. And the red circle cooperative idea of 2 years ago, 1938, is a reality today. And this was pre-civil rights. This was pre-1960 when this conversation was going on. And if you're just now coming in, we do have a docuseries on IGTV where you can catch up through the weeks and see how we've consistently seen that growth and development in a cooperative stance in our community has been instrumental in us growing and healing economically, socially, and as a community since the 1800s, fam. So, we're gonna get into part 2. Let's knock it out. Bro, you got any thoughts on that quote right there? I heard it hit you somewhere.
Bruh, I actually want to read this one by Baker as well.
Oh, man, please.
Almost hourly, the National Office of the Young Negro Cooperatives League is receiving the Macedonian call from those who are convinced that the Negro's economic future is largely in his own hands. Today, it is a letter from Mississippi or West Virginia. Tomorrow is one from Arizona or California. But whether it is from north, south, east, or west, the substance is the same. The Young Negro Cooperatives League and its program is being looked upon as the way out for the Negro. And we're going to be talking in this part 2, deliberate economic development, all about how Du Bois was having conferences. His 12th conference, he focused on cooperatives and did a whole paper so that we could follow the breadcrumbs and see that our people, our ancestors, were doing and living abundantly because we had to, because of segregation, but we entered it with joy. It was like, yeah, I get to support my family today. I get to support my bro over there. And it was a culture that we intentionally built upon. And so part 2 of this book, as we move on to page 80, is going to be going through a lot of information about what happens during the Great Depression. And it's perfect because we seem to be on the precipice of another Great Depression right now.
Right.
And so the Young Negro Cooperatives League, the Negro Cooperatives Guild, the Eastern Carolina Council, which was a federation for northern cooperatives, which was a federation for northern cooperatives, as well as the National Negro Business League and the International Ladies Auxiliary to the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. All of these organizations were doing amazing cooperative development work during the late 20s, early 1930s, or through the 1930s. And there are many lessons learned from what Jessica Gordon-Emhart calls the Federation strategy for strengthening the Black cooperative movement. And all of these organizations advocated or practiced some form of economic cooperation, many actually establishing cooperative businesses. And so there's a note here about cooperative development in the 1930s. We talked about how this is during the Great Depression, and it's actually like the greatest increase of cooperative development in the Black community happened during the Great Depression at a time when we needed it, and we already had the structures in place to work with each other in good ways.
Like they said, man, when people was jumping out the window on Wall Street, Big Mama was in the kitchen cooking up pig feet. We been through the Great Depression. They talking about the Great Depression. Well, my people been in the Depression since we got here. Well, let me say since y'all got here, because we was here living abundantly with the native man, you know, indigenously. We've been in depression since y'all got here. So these periods, man, like Grandma said, man, when they was jumping out the window on Wall Street, I was in the kitchen cooking up these pig feet. You know what I'm talking about? So yeah, man, touch on that, brother. You back in there?
Man, like, so what's cool about this era of the 1930s is that there were a lot of like nationwide calls to just come to action. That's how the Young Negro Cooperative League started. George Schuler, who was an editor for a newspaper, said like, yo, if you want to change this, come to this conference and let's do it. And we read during the last chapter that because of that call, Memphis had
question.
And we're gonna see that all of the mutual aid and early co-op activities that we were learning about up until this point in chapter 5, like the mutual aid societies, the mutual insurance companies, the Knights of Labor, and the different kinds of unions, all of that stuff was a foundation that we used to really like make sure that we were good during a time when no one was good in the U.S. Or at least we've been taught to think that no serving people fine throughout that entire time. It's the 1950s and 60s where we got off track.
No question, man. And we all should know about Black Wall Street. What we must understand through this book, Black Wall Street was a movement. It was a mindset. You know, it was instrumental. It was a definite. You know, once we became separated, instantly we built on creating our own and being able to compete, and also just being able to provide for ourselves and not having to be dependent on the poisonous white titty systems of oppression. So yeah, man, when we think about Black Wall Street, just know that's a mindset, and that was a pinnacle that we see there in Tulsa, but it was a mindset, family.
And so as we're like getting the context set for the next 4 chapters, we're going to read some benefits and lessons learned that are seen throughout the course of this part 2 about deliberate economic development. And it says that members of this early Black cooperative movement understood that cooperatives needed quality co-op education, alternative financing, and comprehensive support from stable institutions. Bro, that's what Read the Nations is doing right now. We're on the right track. Hey.
I say the Black Print family.
Yeah. Organizers and members believed in education and training in relation to both their economic ventures and their organizational needs. Going down a little bit, it says Black cooperatives proliferated during the era, both out of necessity and because of the values of mutual support and cooperation that so many African Americans maintained throughout their experience in the diaspora.
Yes.
There have also been failures, often for lack of resources, capitalization, lack of enough specific management experience and training, poor business planning. There were also examples of sabotage, rents
Oh, yeah.
to exorbitant rates, insurance coverages or other support services withdrawn or made unaffordable, unfair competition, and other deliberate other deliberate subversions, as well as physical harassment to persons and property.
I just don't think they, in this paragraph, she saved the best for the most influential, man. Like physical harassment to persons and property, man. That we've seen that all through the book, man, and especially sabotage. Yeah, we're learning through, a lot of us, man, get positions. We've seen, especially like with Marcus Garvey, with the UNIA. He put people on that he trusted, and they weren't the most qualified, but they were black enough that he saw something in them. And, that can come back and, bite us in the tail, So we have to make sure we're not only hiring black, but we'll make sure that we're hiring quality, that we're educating each other. We're making sure that we're overqualified for the positions to work for ourselves as well. Because the sabotage, and I hate to touch on it, but it's real physical harassment to our persons and property is still going on. Black Lives Matter.
Yep, so let's move up to the top of page 82. This is Collective Courage. We're in part 2, the introduction to deliberate economic cooperation and development. And if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat. We're live on Instagram and YouTube. And we love conversing and engaging with y'all. And also, if you think someone else needs to hear this, go ahead and hit that airplane button and invite them in. So, some of the lessons that Jessica Gordon-Emhart lists here in this bullet point. The first one is talking about how, especially for co-ops started during the Great Depression, while addressing pressing needs was often the first reason to start the co-op, almost all of the co-ops were also started because members understood that they could make more progress by working together and helping one another. They exhibited strong racial solidarity as they witnessed ways in which they could if they were all weak, if one was weak.
Right.
Wait, let me read that again. And they established strong solidarity as they witnessed ways in which they were all weak if one was weak.
Man, we need to highlight that. That need to be Repair Nation's a motto. You don't hear that anymore. We don't hear that as much, bro. We gotta capitalize that. Somebody says, Tweety Fresca says, when y'all are more free, we should all talk about the native bands around the time. I'm a descendant of Black Native coalitions. I say, yeah, as we all are. We can definitely touch on that. But yeah, collective work and responsibility has been indigenous way of life. It's nature, family.
Well, thank you for putting that comment in. I wish we had I wish we were thinking about that during the previous chapters, because then we could have talked about the Trail of Tears and the Dawes rolls and how all of that stuff is interconnected. While the indigenous folks of this land were being moved, as were Black folks. I think there's still some stuff we can bring into this discussion. So,
no question.
Yeah. And so she talks about how values such as solidarity, concern for community, helping thy neighbor, and lifting as you climb were commonly espoused and practiced by all of the cooperatives studied here, as well as their organization.
Lifting as you climb.
Lifting as you climb. I feel like we think right now the point is to get to the top and then maybe put down a rope. But they're saying lift as you climb. Because I guess there is it's possible that when people get to the top, they might not put down the rope.
Yeah, the amount of rope that you got won't be able to reach the people that really need it. So you're very disconnected. We see that happen over and over, and that's a part of that individual philosophy that we missed. Are we allowed to be confused about because we didn't have these resources. We didn't have this story right here. We didn't have the Black print fully. Now we do.
Okay, number 2 is important, bro. Page 82, talking about how education is necessary and in some cases essential, particularly cooperative education and training in democratic organizations. All of the co-ops stress kind.
All
all. Like all the co-ops we're going to be talking about in this next part. So there was a very deliberate attempt to make sure that we're all on the same page, all speaking the same language, so that we can do this together. And there isn't because power can also come from people having more information than another. And if we're trying to withhold that power, the education, we're would you say biting ourselves in the tail, shooting ourselves in the foot? It doesn't help us. It doesn't help us. The third bullet point is talking about how when the members of a co-op have a living wage, it's a lot easier for that co-op to get off the ground. Talking about how co-ops who had mostly poor and low income members had more difficult times raising capital, maintaining equity, and remaining independent of creditors. I mean, and that makes sense, right? Like, we're going to keep reading this. So it says that many of the co-ops accepted equity payments and installments. Those are the stocks, the joint stock corporations and whatnot. Some were still able to be successful, even if dependent on debt equity. You know, we talked about how debt can be slavery in many instances, and we're seeing, and she's highlighting how they were trying to avoid it because they've seen how it could just allow for someone to get the upper hand on you, pull the rug out from under you. Some were still able to be successful if dependent on debt equity, but those co-ops with members whose economic status was more stable, who had decent jobs, and who could contribute in full sooner rather than later, expanded faster and often lasted longer. Right. Often groups of civil servants were seen as a stable pool from which to draw membership. And we don't like the black community used to have a lot of folks in the government working in like the Social Security's office, like my grandma and her daughter did. And because we had all of these like postal jobs or any civil servant jobs, you know that the government's getting taxes, they're going to pay out the people, or at least usually. And so that gives us the ability to be like, okay, so you're getting steady income, help us get the capital for this business now. So as the people who don't have as much have to pay out over time, we can still get started, fulfill their needs, and keep growing. But if we're unable to work across economic lines, work across those class differences, then it makes it a lot harder. And class differences that can mean like going outside of the race, but we know that there are different classes within every race, right? There are the poor, the middle class, the rich. And I know that we usually hang out with people who are in our economic status, but we also have to think about how to make these ventures mixed income so that like she says, they can sustain themselves and keep going.
Right. Make sure we're sharing the education, sharing what we learn, especially here doing this book club and these precious, beautiful times we spend together, family. The Black Mental Health Society says lots of great starter business notes. Thank y'all. Much love, family. RG Footprint says historically, minimum wage was only created for teenagers over summer for a little extra spending. It was in no way intended to be a means of sustenance. Historically, right. That's what's up. She says the early 1900s era was its inception. Right, that's where we're at right now. Early 1900s, family, when all this great creation was going on. And Neek also double taps with you, brother. Says my mom as well worked in those industries. Yeah, mine too. Aunties were nurses. All these great jobs, was systematically underpaid, set up as minimum wage to keep us enslaved. You know what I'm saying? Over time. That's why ownership right now, starting building development, cooperative businesses in our own communities is the way, not employees, but owners, starting a business with co-owners, the cooperative way.
And so at the bottom of page 82, we're seeing that organizations were able to work both nationally, regionally, and locally. And because we had all of these different levels of organization, and we were able to bring different groups of people and different experiences together, we were able to advocate for ourselves and build up our economies in ways that I think we still are trying to get back to today. It's also talking about how the North Carolina Council, who helped create tons of co-ops in Northern Carolina, was instrumental to this movement.
1930s and 40s, yeah.
Yeah, it says, so at the top of page 83, it's saying, in addition, the national black organizations had some relationship to one another, and often held meetings and conferences that brought different groups and leaders together, which allowed the cooperators to network with each other and promote the cooperative movement. I feel like the older I get, the more I realize the importance of relationships. And man, like I'm gonna give my money to someone I trust.
Man,
I'm gonna give my money to someone I trust before I give it to some random person, right? And so if we know the people down the street who are making the bread, or if we know the person down the road who our neighbor that like fixes cars, like I feel like we we either know them and we know we can't trust them, or we know how far we can trust them based on what they've done, or we got to keep building these relationships if they've treated us well, so that they don't have to try and I don't know, man.
You touched on it.
Support the people in our networks and like close to home. We don't have to go to Amco to get an oil change if like the homie down the road knows how to do it.
Yeah, Nick is with you. She says, yes, everything moves at the speed of relationship, especially co-ops. That's deep. I like that. Yeah, and this also goes into us having them conversations. I mean, we need to be speaking to each other as a community, as a street. When's the last time you went and checked on your neighbors, had a conversation, talked to each other like, so who does what? We meet together, we party, but we need to be building same time. This, on the weekend when we was talking about business. We brought it up, not the whole time, but we made a specific time to check in with each other and say, so what are we going to birth as a family, business-wise, to support each other economically this year. Start having these conversations, and what bro's talking about, finding out who's the babysitter on the block, who's the engineer, who's going to school for law, and then get behind that person, get behind that brother, and so we can circulate that dollar, and like Nikki even says, expedite things through our relationships with one another. Having these conversations, having these conversations. Yeah, keep talking about it until you leave this live. Go ahead, bro.
About at the end, at 12:30, point on page 83, is talking about how co-ops were able to establish trust and a team mentality early on, usually succeeded, and often lasted longest. While many of the co-ops depended on strong, charismatic leaders, they depended equally on strong organizational structures. That's key. Since cooperatives operated by democratic participation, these strong organizational structures, though perhaps started in a church or other organizational atmosphere, evolved into a strong team and committee structure with shared leadership, multiple leaders, and mutual responsibility among the members. She talks about how there was violence, sabotage, and hostility. We already know that. We talked about it a lot. But the next paragraph says that in most cases, even when they failed, co-op members were better off when the co-op ended than they had been at the outset. In addition to providing the goods and services members needed, the co-ops provided experience and training that members might not get elsewhere. In addition, members were often able to establish credit, buy or develop an asset, and earn a financial return on their equity in the cooperative. Some of the co-ops were able to return each member's original equity contribution when the cooperative dissolved. And so we're seeing that even if they did go sideways, like some of the times people still got their money back on top of the extra benefits. And benefits are things that we can only give ourselves. Like, I don't want for us to trust a Walmart or a Suzuki or a Honda or whoever to offer us jobs because we know that when it's most convenient for them to put them somewhere else, they will. The thing about co-ops is that because they're from the community members, rooted in communities, they often don't leave. You can look that up on Google and you'll find studies that show that. And so we just really want for you all to consider how to do this. Right? And we're setting up lending circles. We got to think outside the box. Training happening on Friday to account for some of the requests we've been getting. So keep talking to us, because we're gonna give you the structures you need, and we're gonna give you the support you're asking for. But you got to ask. And so we're gonna keep building this thing. We're gonna keep reading this book, understanding the black print of how to build up the new economy we want. And we hope y'all continue with us and invite someone in next time.
Please, please. And like we say all the time, DM us, have any questions, need help with that business plan. We're here. We're offering our services, our time, and our love. This is the Black Parent family. And I don't necessarily think of it as failing. We just learning how to stand on our own, to love one another. You know, when you have a child and you see a child attempting to walk, to take those first steps, you don't say that he's failing. You say that he's going at it. He's going to get it. So this book really talks about us learning how to walk on our own and the steps that we made and how we can better move forward. So appreciate y'all coming with us. It's not a lot of time, but it's enough time. And, you know, we love y'all, man, tremendously and collectively. We got a few comments, bro. Yeah, RG Footprint says, absolutely. We're describing nested wholeness. Relationships and their quality determines the functioning of a community beyond the phrase community as a buzzword. Black Mental Health Society blesses. Neek says, for another incredible Black woman on relationships and cooperation, check out Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. So much about the importance of connection. Then it says, yes, Tweety Fruster, this Friday, we do have a flyer or a post on our page on Repair Nations. Please get that post, share it, family. We're going to think outside the box. We're going to talk about cooperative strategies and how to start a co-op. So yes, this Friday, we're going to be live, from 4:30 to 6. Yeah, please get everybody on. New Economy Coalition. Oh yeah, there you go. Yes, registration. Hit the link to register, and RG Footprint. Beautiful, 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 beautiful. Love y'all. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So we'll see y'all tomorrow. We do this every day, Monday through Friday. This week we're reading 6 to 10 pages per day. So